Hello, fifth graders. For this flipped lesson, you are going to need the following things: a whiteboard, a dry erase marker, and an eraser. Probably a tissue would work best. For each of the slides that I'm going to show you, there's going to be questions. In that time, I'd like you to pause the presentation, take the time to write the answers on your whiteboards, and then play the presentation again to see if you got the answer correct. Go ahead and pause the presentation now to get everything you need, and then come back and play the presentation when you have everything and you're ready to continue. This lesson is 1-5, fractions greater than 1. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to represent fractions greater than 1 with pictures and numbers. You will also be able to convert between fractions and mixed numbers. What is the total? Go ahead, take a second, figure this out on your whiteboard, pause the presentation, and then come back to it. That's the last time I'm going to say that to save time on the video. 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4. I know when I'm adding fractions that have the same denominator, the denominator does not change. So I can go ahead and write the denominator of 4. And then when I add 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, it comes out to 5. The total here is 5/4. The numerator is bigger than the denominator. Fractions that have a larger numerator are greater than 1 whole. Here you can see it with visual representation. The first circle on the left shows that 4/4 are shaded, or the whole circle. The next circle on the right shows just 1/4 shaded. The directions say to name and explain the fractions below. If you have no idea, then just keep playing the slideshow and the video. But if you think you know, take a second, try it out, and then replay the video. I see that there are 4/4 shaded on the left, the circle on the left, and 1 more fourth shaded on the right. That's a total of 5/4. With the rectangles, I can see that there are 4/4 shaded on the top and 1/4 shaded on the bottom for a total of 5/4. Another way to think of this, with the circles on the top here, I see that there's 1 whole shaded and then 1 more fourth. Even though I said 1 and 1/4, I don't need the word and in this fraction. In fact, it's not correct to say it. Same thing on the bottom. I see that there's 1 whole rectangle shaded, and then on the bottom, 1/4 of the second rectangle. What is the meaning of the sum shown below? This is the same problem we had before. It says 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 is equal to 1 and 1/4. The 1 whole comes from the 4/4 added together. Remember that 4/4 is equal to 1 because the numerator and denominator are the same, and a fraction bar means divide. 4 divided by 4 is equal to 1. The additional 1/4 is shown here in the fraction part. A mixed number is a number that is made up of both a whole number and a fraction part. The directions here say to express the sum as a fraction and a mixed number. If I add 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3, I know that the denominators are all the same, so the denominator is still thirds. I'm adding thirds. That doesn't change. The pieces that I'm putting together are thirds. The number of thirds that I'm adding would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 thirds. There's the fraction. It's called an improper fraction, which is kind of a deceiving name. It's not that it's wrong, improper. It just is given the name improper because we don't usually write it this way. If the numerator is bigger than the denominator, we would typically write it as a mixed number. Here's how we do that. We have 5 thirds, and I know it takes 3 thirds to make 1 whole. So instead of representing these 3 thirds as thirds, I'm going to call them 1 whole. These 2 thirds that are left over, I will show using a fraction. So 5 thirds is the exact same thing as 1 2 thirds. This is basically the same thing that was on the previous slide that I already went over. 1 2 thirds is pronounced 1 2 thirds. It means the same thing as 1 2 thirds. We don't write the plus sign when we write mixed numbers, but it is assumed. So know that 1 2 thirds, 1 2 thirds is equal to 1 2 thirds with no sign and no word and. Here it says write mixed numbers for the following. 1 plus 1/6 would just be 1 1/6. 5 7/10, and you should be doing this on your whiteboard. Pause the presentation to see if you get these right and come back to it. 5 plus 7/10 is 5 7/10 with no plus sign, no and. 2 plus 7/8 is 2 7/8. 4 11/12. And 9 2 thirds. And the last one, 20 1/5. This says express the shaded parts as a mixed number and a fraction. So if we look at what we have here, we have circles that are divided into halves. So I know for sure my denominator is going to be 2 because each of these circles is divided into 2 equal parts, or halves. If I count the number of shaded pieces of these circles, I have 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and 1, for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 halves. 7 halves is the exact same thing as a mixed number. Here I have 1 entire circle shaded. Another entire circle makes 2 whole shaded. Another whole circle is 3 whole. And here I've got 1/2. 7 halves is the exact same thing as 3 1/2. The directions here say to write a chain of unit fractions that contains several wholes. You can choose any unit fraction that you want. You are supposed to write the sum as a fraction next to the chain and then circle the individual wholes and write the mixed number. Pause the slideshow and try this out on your own. If you really have no idea, then watch me do a model, then pause it and try one on your own. I'm going to use the unit fraction of 1/4. Now I'll do 1/3. I'm going to say 1/3 plus 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 1/3. There we go. So I've written right now a chain of unit fractions. They're all added together. First, I'm going to find the sum of those unit fractions. I have written 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 1/3. 8 1/3 is 8 thirds. I'm going to circle the individual wholes. To make one whole, it takes 3 thirds. So here I have 3 thirds. Here I have 3 thirds. And now I only have 2 more thirds. So I've only made 2 wholes. And my leftover is 2 thirds. 8 thirds is the exact same thing as 2 2 thirds. We can also go the opposite way. If we're given a mixed number, we can convert the mixed number to fractions. Remember, convert means change. So this example says 2 3/4 pounds of apples are in the basket. Change the mixed number to a fraction. So I can show this visually. I'm going to start off by writing an area model. I have 2 whole and 3/4. Since the fraction is in fourths, I'm going to show the 2 whole divided into fourths as well. Now I'm going to shade everything that I have. For the 2 whole, I know that it takes 4/4 to make 1 whole, and another 4/4 or 8/4 would make 2 whole. For the last area model, I'm only going to shade the 3/4 that I have left over. To change this to a fraction, I could simply just count the number of fourths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. The fraction I have, improper if you want to call it that, is 11/4. 2 3/4 is the exact same thing as 11/4. If I really think about it though, I wouldn't want to change something like 16 1/8 to a fraction by drawing 16 area models and shading them all. There is a quicker way to change 2 3/4 pounds of apples into a fraction. Remember, when I drew the area model 2 3/4, I drew 4 individual pieces for the 2 whole. So I could use multiplication to show 2 times 4 and then just add in the additional 3 pieces. This is a shortcut to changing mixed numbers into fractions. 2 times 4 is 8, plus an additional 3 is 11 total pieces, but the piece size hasn't changed. There's still fourths. Here's what some students find is helpful. If I have 2 3/4, we're going to start at the denominator, put a dot under the denominator, make a C, arrow it around. The bottom is multiply, the top is add. 4 times 2 is equal to 8 plus 3 all over 4. The denominator does not change. And then simplify the top. 8 plus 3 is 11 all over 4. There's also a shortcut to change an improper fraction to a mixed number. We unbuild 9/4. Here's 9/4. Remember that fraction bars mean divide, so 9/4 is the same thing as 9 divided by 4. We can write that as long division. 9 divided by 4. Let's see, I know 4 goes into 9 2 times. 2 times 4 is 8, and I subtract to find the remainder, which is 1. The remainder becomes your numerator, and the divisor becomes your denominator. 9 divided by 4, or 9/4, is the same thing as 2 1/4.